My name is Megan Tate. I'm Director of Community Grants at the Winnipeg Foundation. Welcome to our information session on community grants. A couple of housekeeping notes. If you need to use the washrooms, they're just out those doors and back towards the parkade elevator. I'm joined today with a few of my colleagues who I'd like to introduce you to. At the front, my co-presenter this morning is Neneth Banyas. Neneth is a grants associate at the foundation. Noah Ehrenberg, he's at the back with the camera, another grants associate. And just to note that we are recording today's session, so if you really liked it and want to watch it again, feel free. But also for people who weren't able to make it today, the video will be available on our website. You were greeted this morning by Anna Tisai, who's one of our grants administrators, and Liam Rochak is our brand new youth engagement coordinator. So Aaliyah coordinates our youth and philanthropy program and our summer internship program. We have a lot of material to cover with you today, so I'm going to ask everybody to save their questions until the end. In addition, if you have questions that are kind of unique to your organization's specific circumstances, we're happy to stick around and answer questions one-on-one as well. All right, so without further ado. So this morning we're going to be telling you a little bit about the Winnipeg Foundation. I see some familiar faces in the audience, so some of you have heard me give this spiel before. We're going to give you an overview of a number of different granting programs that are available at the foundation, give you a sneak peek of what we're planning for multi-year community grants, and then give you a lot of detail about how to apply for a one-time community grant, and that's probably most relevant because those applications are due at the end of this month. So a little bit about the Winnipeg Foundation. We're a community foundation. We were built by people from all walks of life who want to support charitable work in our community. We're always so proud to say that the Winnipeg Foundation is the very first community foundation ever established in Canada. We were started in 1921, so we're planning for our 100th anniversary, which will happen next year. Today, there's over 190 community foundations from coast to coast to coast, including 55 of those right here in Manitoba. And so really what makes us a community foundation is all of the donors who over the years have contributed to the foundation. Those gifts are pooled and invested in endowment funds, and each year it's the income off those funds that we're able to distribute as grants to community organizations like yours. We always like to show this chart because I think when a lot of people think of the Winnipeg Foundation, they think of the grants that we award in response to applications. You fill out a form, you submit it to the foundation, you hear back from us. And certainly that's a big part of what we do. So you'll see at the top, responsive grants. About a third of our grant making is in response to applications from community organizations through our various grant streams. But it's not the only way that the foundation makes grants. So if you see the next line there, about a quarter of our grant making goes back out of what we call agency or designated funds. So a number of community organizations have established an agency fund at the foundation. And each year the income from that fund goes back to your organization to be used at your discretion. And often it's your donors who are making gifts to those agency funds to support your organization in a little bit of a different way. We also have designated funds, and those are established by donors who indicate at the time of their gift which organization they want to receive the annual income in perpetuity. So it might be their favorite health-related charity, their favorite arts organization, whatever the case might be. It's the donor that designates who's going to be the recipient of those grant funds. Our fastest growing fund type is what we call donor-advised funds. And those are funds where donors each year are actively involved in the decision-making about where their grant dollars go. We often get questions from organizations asking how they can apply to a donor-advised fund. And the answer is currently, you can't apply specifically to a donor-advised fund, but when you apply for a community grant at the Winnipeg Foundation, we share those applications with donors who might be interested in supporting them. In addition, we always encourage organizations to maintain and steward the donors that you already have, because some of them might have a donor advised fund here at the foundation, and that's how they're making their grant making decisions, is about their existing relationships with charitable organizations. At the bottom, you'll see managed funds and Manitoba Community Foundation funds. The Winnipeg Foundation manages the assets on behalf of a number of organizations, and so the income from those funds goes back to those organizations. You'll see 6% of our grant making goes out in the form of leadership projects, and those are initiatives that are proactively undertaken by our board. So this year you might have seen the announcement, the opening of the Belvedere across the river in St. Boniface. That was a strategic leadership project of our board of directors. Another example is Aaliyah's program, Youth and Philanthropy. That's a leadership project where young people have the opportunity to make grants to their favorite charitable organizations. And finally, a small part of the work that we do is scholarships. We manage scholarship funds on behalf of educational institutions, groups of donors. We don't select the recipients, that's simply managing the funds on their behalf. So that's sort of a snapshot of all the different kind of grant making that the foundation does. I should note, actually, last week we were really excited to announce the results of our 2019 grant making, and we released $57.5 million in grants to over 900 different community organizations. So that was an exciting announcement we were able to make last week. So responsive grants is sort of the umbrella name that we give to all grants that are awarded in response to an application. So a little bit sort of general information, oh, this is slow, okay. A little bit of general information about the Winnipeg Foundation. So first of all, we're a project funder. And so what that means is that funding from the Winnipeg Foundation is typically for a specific purpose and is time limited, usually 1 year or less, but this can certainly vary depending on the type of the project. Being a project funder allows us to kind of balance the resources that we have available and to remain flexible to changing community needs. We always note that applying for a grant is a competitive process, that we always receive far more is requested of the foundation than we have available to grant in any given year. We describe ourselves as a 360-degree funder, which means we grant across the broad spectrum of community organizations and community projects. So everything from health to education, environment, arts and culture, recreation, just the full spectrum of community organizations. I'm going to give you a little sneak peek, or not a sneak peek, but a little bit of information about each of the response and granting programs that you have, because although you're here to apply for a community grant, there might be other granting streams that are also applicable to your organization. First up, camp and summer program grants. This is what I call the FUN program. We award grants of up to $10,000 so that youth-serving organizations can provide fun summer activities for disadvantaged children and youth. And this could be kids that face barriers due to economic challenges, health or physical challenges. Grants can support day programs, overnight camping experiences, that kind of thing. And these applications are coming up due in mid-February. We also have the Literacy for Life Grants program. Grants of up to $4,000 are awarded specifically for what we call intergenerational literacy projects. So that is typically little kids and parents or caregivers. It could be grandparents, any sort of intergenerational literacy programming. And applications for that program are accepted 3 times a year. Nourishing Potential Grants award grants of up to $10,000 to provide nutritious food for children and youth. And we accept applications for that program twice a year. Professional development grants, you can see we've got a whole bunch of categories with that. I won't go through them all today. You've got them in your handouts. But just to note that professional development grants are actually accepted on a continuous intake. We try to return those around in 4 to 6 weeks, depending on the volume of applications we have at any given time. So we just ask you to kind of plan accordingly for when you're hoping to take the professional development activity and back it up from there when we might be able to give you a decision. I do want to highlight one thing because it's new. You'll see safety training for frontline workers, grants of up to $5,000. And that's really in response to what we were hearing from community organizations who are experiencing some of the challenges in their communities due to people who might be under the influence of drugs or alcohol and are presenting at these organizations. And so just giving frontline staff some safety training, things like nonviolent crisis intervention, that kind of thing. So if that applies to your organization, we're happy to answer questions about that at the end of the presentation. A new grant stream that we introduced last year is organizational development grants. And this is really to help organizations do planning, strengthen their capacity, that kind of thing. Grants are up to $10,000. Again, it is a continuous intake for that grant stream. And we're piloting it for 3 years. So this is the second year of our 3-year pilot. Again, up on the screen and in your notes, you can see the full range, or it's not even the full range. These are just examples of the types of projects that you might be able to consider be eligible projects through our organizational development grants, but it's not a comprehensive list. So if you have an idea for something that you think might fit for organizational development, please feel free to give us a call and we're happy to talk you through whether your project might be a fit for that initiative or not. This is super well, it doesn't feel time sensitive today because it's so snowy, but the Winnipeg Foundation also offers the summer internship program. And that program provides grants to charitable organizations to host an intern in the summer. It really is a mentorship program, and so what we do is we select charitable organizations to be hosts, and then we select participants in our youth and philanthropy program, and we go through this matchmaking process to match young people up with community organizations. So again, the foundation covers the wages and incidental costs for hosting an intern, and in return, the charitable organizations provide mentorship and some charitable work experience over the summer months. So if you have questions about the summer internship program, Aaliyah is here to answer any of those questions. And those applications are also due mid-February. So what we're really here to talk about today is community grants. And so there are 3 types of community grants. One-time grants, which is the application intake that we're currently in. Major capital grants, so that's for significant capital projects where the amount requested to the Winnipeg Foundation is $100,000 or greater. We just announced the 2019 major capital grants, and so that includes $500,000 contribution to the Main Street project for their capital campaign, $500,000 to the Bruce Oak Recovery Center for their capital campaign. We provided major capital grants to West Broadway Youth Outreach because they're going through an expansion, so fairly significant capital projects. And finally, what we're calling resilient community grants, which is our next iteration of multi-year grants. So what I'm going to share with you today about multi-year is going to be quite high level. We're planning to host information sessions in March and April closer to the intake for multi-year grants. Well, we just thought it would be helpful for you to have that information today so that organizations can be strategic about mapping out your applications to the foundation, because organizations can only apply for 1 community grant per calendar year. So you need to be strategic about kind of what your priority project is and match it up with our intakes and all that good stuff. So some of you might remember that in 2017, the Winnipeg Foundation launched multi-year community grants on a 2-year pilot basis. And our intention was always to offer those for 2 years and kind of take 2019 to sit back, reflect on the process and what we've learned. So a couple of things that we learned during the pilot of multi-year. First of all, we received really positive feedback from the grantees around receiving more than 1 year of funding. That allowed them some security. It allowed them to do longer term planning. But the other thing that we learned is that a lot can change for an organization in 3 years. And so in that time period, certainly the environment around the organizations changed in terms of funding, whether it was changes to their provincial funding or changes with donors that they might have come to rely on, changes in terms of the challenges that they were addressing with their work, and then also changes within their organization, whether it was turnover of board or staff or that kind of thing. And so the other thing that we learned from this process was that we really need to stay in touch with our community partners that have received multi-year funding, and to be flexible and to adapt as their circumstances change over the terms of the grant. So just some really interesting learnings as part of that process. So for the next 3 years, our grants committee has approved calls for proposals for what we're calling resilient community grants. So that means this year, next year, and again in 2022, the Winnipeg Foundation will be issuing calls for proposals for multi-year grants. And our goal is to be able to ensure funding consistency for community organizations. So we want you to know what our funding intakes are going to look like for the next few years. But we're doing it in 3-year increments because, as we've known, so much can change, and so this gives us the flexibility to kind of review what we're going to learn from this pilot and adapt as necessary to meet changing community needs. So once again, there's going to be 2 categories of multi-year grants. The first is going to be program grants, and so this is going to be support for programs that have great potential for community impact, as well as that demonstrate alignment with one or more of the Winnipeg Foundation's grant-making priorities. The maximum request will be $75,000 per year, and we are looking for organizations that already have a community grant history with the Winnipeg Foundation. If your organization doesn't have a grant history with the foundation, we'd encourage you to apply for a one-time community grant this year, and then that could open the doors for further conversation. The second category of multi-year funding will be capacity building. Once again, we'll be providing support for staffing that will strengthen an organization's internal capacity, allowing them to better fulfill their mission. So when we say staffing, typically we mean administrative staffing. We're not talking about program staff or other types of staff. In the first iteration of multi-year funding, we did things like increase the hours of a part-time executive director, administrative assistants, financial staff. Those are the kinds of staffing that we're anticipating seeing again through this initiative. But again, we'll be having more detailed information sessions in the next few months. The maximum requests for these grants are also going to be $75,000. As I mentioned, staffing grants can either expand the hours of existing staff or add new staff to an organization. The funding is specifically to cover the costs of salaries as well as any employment-related costs like MERCs. And once again, we're looking for organizations that already have a grant history with the Winnipeg Foundation. So again, just to help you strategize about your applications, we'll be hosting information sessions in March and April. It will be a 2-stage application process with a fairly simple stage 1 application due April 30th. For those organizations that are invited to apply with a full proposal, those applications will be due at the end of June. And then we anticipate decisions at the end of September or early October. And we always note that organizations that do receive a resilient community grant will not be eligible to apply for a new community grant in any category until the multi-year funding agreement has concluded and has been reported on. So again, just kind of strategizing your applications to the foundation. That's good information to have. So I mentioned a little bit about our grant-making priorities. So this is something new that the foundation introduced last year, and it sort of ties into 2 things that are happening at the foundation. So the first thing is in 2017, the Winnipeg Foundation launched our Vital Signs report. And so that was a report that kind of took the pulse of Winnipeggers. And so we polled Winnipeggers to see what issues were a priority to them, then we put it together in a report that's still available on our website. And the second thing that happened is last year the Winnipeg Foundation launched our New Causes campaign. So you might have seen it on the sides of buses or on billboards. Some of our models may or may not be in the room today. So we're really proud of that campaign about our causes. And so we've organized our grant making priorities based on what we heard from community and organized it under the various causes that the foundation has. So under the cause of children, youth, and families, we've identified 3 priorities. We're looking for projects that help individuals develop their potential, for projects that empower families, and for projects that cultivate belonging and safety in neighborhoods. So an example of a project that might fit under these priorities is a parenting workshop. The priority that would best fit this project is empowering families, so a workshop that might give parents extra skills that they can use with their children. And so a project that would fall under that category, the applicant would describe how their project meets those priorities. Under literacy, education, and employment, we're looking for projects that will close education gaps, increase school readiness and high school completion rates, as well as post-secondary enrollment, or projects that support transition to the workforce. So an example here might be an after-school homework club for youth that will help those students increase their chances of graduating from high school. So that would be a project that would fit under the priority of high school completion. Under the category, or under the cause of health, wellness, and recreation, we're looking for projects that encourage prevention and well-being, that enhance food security, that remove barriers to recreation and sports, and that reduce isolation for seniors and the vulnerable. So an example of a project under these categories might be a Zumba class for seniors, which actually addresses 2 of our priorities, which is prevention, encouraging prevention and well-being, as well as reducing isolation for seniors. Under the cause of arts, culture, and heritage, we're looking for projects that create social change through art, that make art and culture accessible, and that celebrate Winnipeg's diverse cultural heritage. So an example here might be an art program for at-risk youth that certainly removes barriers, makes art and culture accessible, and also has the opportunity to create social change through art. And our final cause is environment and animal welfare. And so under this cause, we're looking for projects that promote sustainable lifestyles, that green the charitable sector, and that tackle climate change. And so this is important to note. When we say green the charitable sector, we're not necessarily talking about environmental organizations. We know that all organizations are concerned about climate change and what they can do to reduce their impact on the environment. So an example of a recent grant that we did is that Lighthouse Mission applied to the foundation to purchase plates and cutlery, bowls and dishes, because up until now they had been using disposable dishes to serve their meals. And so the grant from the Winnipeg Foundation allowed them to purchase those dishes. They're reducing the waste that's going into landfills, so they're certainly greening their organization and also just providing a more welcoming meal for their clients. So that's an example of any organization who could do some greening activities. Two final grant-making priorities that don't necessarily fall under any of the causes that we anticipate would be woven throughout all of the causes and could be applicable to any organization. The first is capacity building. So for many years, the Winnipeg Foundation has been interested in how we can support and strengthen organizations in our community. So we do have, as I've noted, a dedicated organizational development grant stream. But through our one-time community grants, we also do accept proposals for larger capacity building projects. So for example, if an organization was thinking of embarking on a major capital campaign, that some of the planning and costs related to that would certainly exceed our $10,000 cap on org development grants. So we'd still consider those applications through one-time community grants as well. And finally, reconciliation is a theme that's woven throughout all of our grant-making priorities. You might remember last year, the Winnipeg Foundation announced the recipients. We held a one-time call for proposals specifically for reconciliation projects, with the idea that we would learn from community about what the priorities were, and then roll that into our one-time community grants. So again, we're always interested in organizations who are interested in embarking on a project that addresses reconciliation. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to my colleague, Neneth. And Neneth is going to get into the real nitty-gritty of how to apply for a one-time community grant at the Winnipeg Foundation. And I'm going to turn over the mic.
Thanks, man. Yeah, that's right. I can hear you.
Okay. I do. Thank you. All right. Good morning, everyone. So now we're going to be talking about our one-time community grant. But before I start giving information about our one-time community grant, I'm going to quickly go through what's in your package. So on your left-hand side of inside your package, those are the information for the multi-year program. And then on the right-hand side of in your folder are all the documents for your for the one-time community grant application. We have a grants on a glance page in your package. It will outline all the deadlines of all our special grants and our one-time community grant. So this is a good handy kind of document to figure things out for you. At the back of that page, it outlines who are the members of the grants team, all the associates, and all of our portfolios. So if you have, for example, a question regarding children and youth, if that's your organization, feel free to give me a call. If your organization is a health organization, feel free to give Noah a call. So it lists all our portfolios in the back of that page. We also have the granting priorities for you to review, our assessment and policy criteria, how to apply online, a sample of the budget, and also just kind of screenshots on how to submit our online application. I'm going to stress our online application at the end because we know that there are many different online platforms and we want to ensure that you submit it on time and correctly. So for our one-time community grant, is a definite short-term grant. It's either for a pilot, for example, or an ongoing project that's for X amount of period of time. So typically it's 12 months. And in some cases, it's for projects that we have previously funded at the foundation, but the organization needs a little bit more extra time to get more footing and probably getting more results in their community. So technically, our one-time community grant is not an ongoing program. We're not a core funder, so these are short-time community grants. So for our one-time community grant, I call our one-time community grant like a Swiss Army knife or an Instapot. It could do many different things. So we could do capital renovation. So that could be a range of different infrastructure projects, replacing your flooring, doing a little bit more construction in your facility, conferences and events, conferences or performances, festivals, anniversary celebrations, special exhibitions, equipment and infrastructure. So these are computers, your heater, furnishings, websites as examples. Program operating, so cost of a specific program or project could include staffing and other program costs. And it could also include 10 to 15 administration costs for the project. Reports and planning, so these are strategic plans, fundraising strategies, evaluation, and business plans. Capital campaigns we also do. Another area is short-term operating. So these are under special circumstances. We will consider grant requests to support an organization to do some bridge funding. We definitely encourage you to talk to Megan in regards about that. But one criteria that we're looking for these type of project is a strong plan securing other funding moving forward. Another area is our organizational development or capacity building. So this is more involved, more development, strategic planning, evaluations, or interim short-term funding. What we don't support are money specifically to provide for individuals, project costs incurred before the grant decision, annual fundraising, campaigns or events, paying mortgages or reducing deficits, political activities, exclusively religious activities, or other grant-making programs. So if you are a grant maker, you cannot ask us for a grant to re-grant it to someone else. So in terms of what we look for a grant application, you could definitely use some of the documents in your package. All the documents that is needed for any application or background information, you can find those in our resource tab on our website. So for eligibility, we support only registered charitables. So that's part of our first eligibility requirement. An organization may submit a one community grant application for, you have those three categories, right? One-time community grant, a resilient community grant, or a major capital grant. So you have to pick one of those per calendar year. We could consider a second application if this is a case of a collaboration, and I'll explain that a little bit more later on. Projects must primarily benefit the people of Winnipeg. So if your organization is located outside of the city, you must make a strong case for how Winnipeggers benefit the project. So organization must submit a satisfactory report on their previous community grant before they could submit another grant. In most cases, this will be a final report. Final report should be submitted 30 days before submitting a new application. In some cases, if you're new to your organization and you don't know if there's an active grant, feel free to give us a call and we could look at your grant history if there's anything pending. However, we could also accept an interim report for organizations that are seeking subsequent year of support for the same project, just to allow the timing and there's no kind of gap in activities in between. So if that's the case for you, we encourage you to consult your community grants associate on file. And then the last one is grants are not made retroactively. So our grants committee examines both the organization and the project that's being proposed. Some organizational considerations are your previous track record. So if your organization is new to the Winnipeg Foundation, provide some examples of your successes in the application. Reporting must be up to date and satisfactory. And your ability to contribute to the program should be included in the project. So it's either in kind or cash. And grants associates will conduct site visits where applicable. I always get asked, oh, if you come to my organization, is this a yes? Not necessarily. It gives us an opportunity to get to know the organization and the project and collect the information for the grants committee. So other project considerations are the alignment with the foundation's grant-making priorities, congruency with your organization's mission. So let's say if the project is shifting a little bit away from what your organization is typically is doing, please explain how you might want how is this project is being supported by the board, or how is this being part of your new mandate or new type of way of doing in your organization. So other things that the grants committee will look at is clear goals and activities, overall viability of the project, what's the benefit of the project in the community. So this could be with individuals in your organization, the families, or the neighborhood. They will also look at the needs of the population being served, and then the support from other funders or organizations. So other considerations are the qualification of staff, consultation and collaboration if you've done that prior to submitting an application. Is the budget realistic? The viability of the project if the full amount requested is not granted. Other things are perspectives of community experts and funders if relevant for the project. Other considerations are if it's a large project, are there other funders supporting the project? Diverse populations in the project. Is there cultural competency being demonstrated in the application in the organization? Construction and renovation project, if accessibility has been considered. So other considerations, again, more considerations. Organizations should adhere to effective practice followed by the sector, your sector. A project's impact on the environment is considered. So, for example, Megan's example about using reusable plates or potentially buying recyclable materials. And then grants are not made for projects that are primary responsibility of a municipal, provincial, or federal government. So an example of that is a nurse in a hospital or a teacher in a school. So collaboration. So our definition of collaboration has not changed, but we wanted to provide more guidance on what we mean about collaboration. So collaboration for us means two or more registered charity or a registered charity and a nonprofit organization jointly planning and implementing a project, and for-profit business are not considered to be collaborative partners in a collaboration project. All collaborative partners must work toward a common goal or goals to either increase their organizational capacity or effectiveness, or program efficiency or effectiveness, or tackle a community issue. Examples would be administrative alliances or mergers that combine strengths and perspectives. Some of the collaboration features are clearly identify that this is a collaborative project in your application and who the partners are. Partners have the same shared vision of the project. In the application, describe the community issue that this project is addressing, describe the involvement of each partner and their previous relevant work in the area. Each partner must provide a signed letter of agreement, either one letter or two letters combined, one letter combined or two separate letters, sorry about that, and that clearly outlines their specific roles and responsibility. Also you will need to explain how you're sharing expertise and how you're sharing in-kind and cash resources towards the project, and you will need to outline that in the budget. We are looking for authentic involvement from beginning to end, so from planning to implementation to the evaluation. We are looking for how often the groups are communicating within the project. If you are a coalition or a network, we encourage you to talk to one of us before applying. So applications for our one-time community grant is due January 31st at 4:30. We're going to be stressing 4:30 all throughout the presentation, just in case. So in progress application, so if you don't submit it, it'll be lost into the internet, I guess. And if you are applying during office hours, this means that you have more access to phone assistance, and you could give us a call if you're running into problems. So if you apply for a community grant and a special grants in the same calendar year, but for a different project, that's okay. We also let organizations know that even though organizations are eligible to apply for a one-time community grant per year, that does not mean that you will receive support. The process is always competitive, and it's becoming even more so with increased number of application that we receive each intake. So grant history is definitely taken into account. The Winnipeg Foundation reviews all applications based on merit and does not discriminate on the basis of actual or perceived group characteristic as identified in the Manitoba Human Rights Code. Organizations applying for a grant, the Winnipeg Foundation must also adhere to the Manitoba Human Rights Code. So what else should I share? It is important to note that our application and decision dates when you're planning for your project, as we do not fund projects retroactively. So for example, if you apply for a January intake, you'll receive information at the end of May. So technically, you could start your project in June. So if your project starts in April, there would be a portion that we won't be able to, if it's approved, we won't be able to retroactively support those activities. And like I said earlier, if you have any questions, feel free to call us, email us, or set up a meeting. So when you're preparing for your application, like I said, review what's in your package. Please give us a call if you need to figure out your previous grant history if you're unaware. And the next few slides will be highlighting the areas where your grant application has recently changed. So if you're setting up an account, it's good to use a general email address for your organization. If you move on, so for example, if staff moves on to another job, others will not be able to access that account. If you have previously applied, you will need to enter your password. If you've forgotten your password, I'm sorry, I have to explain this to you. You have to click forget password and then enter your email address as prompted, and your new temporary password will be sent to you. We get lots of questions about passwords, so that's why I'm stressing this out. And then once you get into the application, you will need to complete like a quick eligibility quiz before going into the application. They will ask for your registered charity number to begin your application as well. So some of the features of our online application, you can save your application and come back later by clicking Save and Finish later. And when you want to access your in-progress application, do not click Apply Now again, because it'll make you go back to where you were. So instead, keep scrolling down and go to your account, and you'll see where your the application that you were working on. When you click Save and Finish later, you will receive a notification a generated email saying your application has been saved. This means it's not submitted. It's just been saved in the program. You can also email a draft of your application to one of your colleagues or to yourself if you want to review it. So information that you will need in your application will be your annual expense budget. So I usually advise groups to talk to your finance person, your bookkeeper, your ED, so you can start collecting those information. So you will need your annual expense budget, a brief description of your organization, and basically this is a general overview of what your organization is all about, the services you provide and to whom. And it gives us a little bit of context of what you're doing in the community. Things we look for under this section is your history, your track record, any key milestone that will give us confidence in your organization. And I usually advise groups to update this section. We have different staff right now, and you might have talked to a different grants associate before, so this is just for us to get to know your organization a little bit better. And sometimes things change over the year, and we want you to celebrate those milestones and include that in this section. Another information that we need is the contact details for your highest ranking staff member. So this is your CEO or your executive director. If your organization has no paid staff, this will be your board chair. We will also need a project contact, and basically this will be the staff who is the most knowledgeable about the project. So we will be contacting this person if we have any follow-up questions about the project. So if you're working with a consultant to prepare your application, you must list a staff or a board as a project contact and not the consultant. In terms of the grant request, please ensure that the number is correct and it matches what you have in your application and also your budget. I know little things, but just in case. Maximum request is $100,000. However, the majority of our one-time community grants that were approved is around under $50,000. The next section is I want to highlight, it's a super important part, which is the project summary. Make sure that the summary accurately reflects your project plans. We provide this information to our donor advisors. So this is kind of you're a little bit of hook to kind of pique the interest of our donor advice fund holders. So make sure that this is one of the strongest area in your application. Another information that will be asked of you in the application is the project start date and end date. Select the cause that best describe your project. So this will be either children, youth, and families, literacy, education, and employment, health, wellness, and recreation, arts, culture, and heritage, environment, and animal welfare. So once you select that cost type, it's going to ask you to select your project type. And so the project type could be capital campaign, conference and events, capital reno, program operating, or reports and planning. So one question we get asked sometimes is that, is one of the costs much better than the other costs? Thinking that different costs have different amounts of money. But this question allows you to get into more details and tell us what you plan to do. So you could put timeline as an example in this section. Question number 2 is state which of the grant-making priorities your project addresses and describe how your project addressed this priority. So this is a new question in our application. And so for this section, we ask you to review the 16 granting priorities in one of your handouts. And then we ask you to choose 1 or 2 that best fit your project. So out of the 16 granting priorities, only choose 1 or 2. And explain how your project addresses these priorities. We always get questions, can we choose more? Yes, you can choose more, but we definitely want you to contain that application, and 1 or 2 is a better choice. So these questions are the same from our previous application. Describe how you will implement the project, population served, specific activities and timelines. So tell us the participants who will benefit more in the project. Cite the evidence of need of the project and how it will strengthen your organization and or community. So you can use evidence from anecdotes, survey results that you've done in your organization, any research, observation by staff, or any statistics. The next set of questions is describe the involvement of your community and other organizations in developing and implementing the project. It just gives us a picture of your partners, who's involved, either who's referring participants to you, who's working with you on certain aspects of the project. In some cases, you are welcome to include letter of support from community partners that endorses the project. The next question is identify proposed goals, outcomes, and project, and how will you evaluate them? So when you're doing this question, be realistic. This is how we evaluate your project at the end. So when we receive your final report, we go back to this portion of your application and see how you did in your project. And then the last one is identify sources of financial support for ongoing operating costs for your project. So be specific as best as you can. Identify the funders if applicable. So if it's the province of Manitoba, you can say building sustainability plan. Just don't say province of Manitoba. List any confirmed or potential funders in the application budget, and if there are no ongoing costs, please explain in this section. So the next section is the required attachments. So these information, you could definitely seek support within your organization, your finance person, your bookkeeper, your ED, your board chair, or your treasurer. So you will need to submit a project budget, a list of board of directors, your current list of board of directors, your most recent audited financial statement. If your organization does not have an audited financial statement, we will accept review engagement or notice to reader. You will also need to include your most recent annual report, If you don't have an annual report, you can attach minutes from your AGM meeting. And last, you will need to submit an income and expense budget for the current year. Other attachments, so where applicable, if your project involves a kind of equipment and infrastructure or capital, you will need some quotes for those. We advise organizations to get up to 2 quotes for them. If your project is a collaboration project, you will need letters from your collaborators. Either one letter signed by all partners or separate letters from the partners. If your project, if you're a school and the project involves the school, you will need a letter from the division outlining their support for this project. Other optional documents are cover letter. With letter of support, we advise organization to pick and choose the best ones that you could include in the application, showing a range of stakeholders that you're working with for that project. And then it's not helpful to provide generic letters if it's like the same letter for one organization to another. Also, another thing is, sometimes we receive letters from politicians, and that's really, you don't need to submit a letter like that. Another thing that we tell organization is that please do not send any materials such as books, videos, or CDs, because we cannot save those in our filing system. And then also we cannot accept any web links to Dropbox or any document sharing programs with our security infrastructure at the foundation. So in the next section, I'll be talking about your project budget. So you have a copy of your a budget template in your package. And basically, the top part of the budget looks at the revenues. So the project budget is specific to the project and not your organizational operation budget. And we've split this in 2 slides. We ask organizations to complete the green portions of the form. So this would be on the left-hand side of the budget. So under revenue, please provide the total revenue for the project, including the grant request to the foundation. Be specific as much as possible, like I mentioned earlier, in terms of your funder, for if it's coming from different government departments. Use checkbox on the side to let us know if that amount has been confirmed. You can include in-kind revenue in the revenue portion, but just to remind you that you have to offset that at the bottom of the page in the expenses portion. So for example, if you're listing volunteer hours as in-kind contribution, make sure that that's also you account for that below. The revised column and the revised and actual columns will help you track your project when the grant has been awarded. The bottom portion of the budget is the expense side. You can list all your expense portion here that align with your project description. Just to let you know, our templates add automatically, so you don't have to worry about that. And then make sure that the expenses and the revenues balance one another. Okay? So this section, I'll be talking a little bit more about the online application and how you're uploading attachments. And the reason why I'm explaining this a little bit more is because this is where a lot of the questions that we receive with our application system. And so So when you're uploading attachment, you have to click the title and select from the drop-down menu the file that you wish to attach. Okay. And then beside the file, click Browse to find the file you wish to select. And then select it, and then you can upload that file. When you upload your file, it will appear at the top of your screen. You will discover that if you made an error, you could remove the file, that's okay. And then you just keep clicking to the required document. You have to submit all the required document. It has to be attached before you move through the application. If there's nothing attached, it will not, you won't get to the end of the application. When your application is complete, you have to click Review and Submit. The save function is just to save it in the internet, and so the button that you need is the Review and Submit button. Once you review and submit, but once you click the Review and Submit button, you will get like an automated kind of email back saying that it's all completed. Okay. So again, it'll ask you again to submit your application. Once you click Submit, you will get an automatic email confirming that you can save in your records. This is basically our tracking information to track the application in between. But a few weeks after our intake deadline, you will receive an email from our one of our grant staff officially confirming the application. So this is the one that you need the most, and confirming the grant number. So some general tips. Be concise and clear with your application. Try to avoid any jargon or acronyms. Many organizations have told us that they prepared their application in Word and they just cut and paste, and that's completely okay. However, sometimes there could be some formatting kind of challenges, so just be mindful of that. So bullets, like apostrophe, sometimes if you cut and paste, does not translate in our application, so just proofread that one more time. Double check your budget and make sure that the amount you've entered for the foundation matches the amount requested in your proposal. Always consider someone to help you out with your proposal. Ask them to proofread your project, particularly the summary portion that donor advisors review. Some note about our deadline. Again, our portal closes at 4:30 sharp. We tell organizations if you could submit, hours before that time, it'll be great. Sometimes it takes a couple of minutes to upload and send, and depending on the efficiency of your computer, I've had circumstances where an organization has cut it to the close, and once it was 4:30, they weren't able to submit, and we weren't able to accept their application. So I would hate for that to happen again to another organization. And then if there are if you have any questions about our online application, please give us a call. So I'm going to talk about the review process. We're almost close to the end. The grants associate, the proposal that you submitted will be assigned to a grants associate. And so sometimes it comes with the portfolio approach. So if your project is a children or a family-based project, most likely it'll go to me. So the review process takes about 4 months or so. And the grants associate will review your application to ensure that all the required information or documents are in there, and we'll ask you questions if there are any follow-up that that's required. And sometimes we do site visits, like I mentioned earlier on. And at the end, the grants committee reviews the application, and then they make the decisions at the end. So after the grant decision, for successful grantees, you will receive a terms of granting agreement. So we just request that you sign and return that agreement to us. There's a new item in our TGA right now outlining that if your organization engages with a fundraiser as a staff or consultant, they must adhere to the Association Fundraising Professional Code of Ethics, specifically number 21. Members shall not accept compensations or enter into contract that is based on percentage or contribution, nor shall members accept finder's fee or contingency fees. So once you receive your TGA and signed it, sometimes we ask you to review your TGAs thoroughly. Our agreements are super simple. It's only 2 pages. But if you have any questions, feel free to give us a call. Another important component in the TGA is that sometimes there's conditions that you need to meet for your project. So that would be highlighted at the top of the agreement. And if you have questions about the agreement, feel free to call the associate or the specialist on file. In your TGA at the bottom, kind of in the middle of your TGA, it will kind of outline if there are donor advisors that supported your project. If there are donor advisors that supported your project, we just ask you to write a letter of thanks to the donor advisors, and there would be a note in your TGA outlining how to do that. Another thing that we let our organizations know is that please stay in touch. Let us know how things are going for you. If there are any changes, we're here to support you. I feel like it's better to have those discussions if there are any changes in the middle of the project rather than the end that is fraught with awkward conversations at the end. Like I said, we are not here to penalize any group, so we're here to help you problem solve if there are any changes in your project. We require satisfactory report before you could apply for another community grant, and final report should be submitted 30 days prior to the application. And then some tips if you're unsuccessful in receiving the grant, you will be notified by us. Feel free to follow up with the grants associate to see if there's any feedback from the committee. We're happy to provide that feedback, how we can strengthen your next application moving forward. I know sometimes when you're receiving that information, you put all your efforts into that application and you might feel, definitely upset or angry about the decline. We just ask you to, maybe wait a little bit and then give us a call. And so then we're better, we're better equipped to provide that feedback to you. So that's the end of the presentation for our one-time community grant, and we're happy to answer questions. Just as Megan mentioned earlier on, we're happy to answer questions about general questions about the one-time community grant or the multi-year grant. We understand that different organizations are at different points in time, so feel free to save that at the end, and we're here to provide that one-on-one support for you either today or give us a call or email us later on. And that's it. We're here to take questions. Oh, sorry. I'm going to invite Megan up. Yes.
So I'm going to repeat the questions just so that everybody can hear it, and also so those of us, the people who are watching the video, can do that. Okay. Yes. Yeah, so just looking for clarification about applications. So yes, if an organization applies this January, that would be considered your community grant application for 2020. So you would not be eligible to apply for a resilient community grant in the spring. Yeah, happy to clarify that. Yeah. Yeah, so that's a great question. It was a question about the two categories for multi-year funding, which is program grants and capacity building. Staffing costs would be an eligible expense as part of a program grant, but we anticipate that there could be more diverse budget items as part of a program grant. Yeah, great question. Any at the back? Yeah, so the question was about payment of the multi-year grants. Our practice has been typically to pay out annually. It would depend if there were any conditions put on the grant, but typically we'd anticipate year one would be paid out immediately. Year two of a multi-year grant would be paid out upon submission of an interim report. Year three would be paid out again on submission of an interim report. Yeah. Okay. Yes, so the question was about collaborations and sort of the logistics of applying. At the end of the day, one charitable organization needs to be the one that submits the application, but it should be clear throughout the proposal who the collaborative partners are. Yeah, so the question was about attachments for the collaborative project. Certainly we'd be looking for the audited statements and the board list of the applicant organization. You may choose to submit information on the partner organization as well, but sort of our minimum requirements would be for the applicant organization. Yeah. So maybe I'll just one or two more general questions, and then again, we're happy to stick around and answer one-on-one. Yeah. Yeah, so the question was about Build 150 grants. And so the Manitoba Build 150 didn't provide any additional requirements for those grants. It's really, as long as you meet our eligibility requirements for a community grant, then we would accept it. Really, the Manitoba 150 is like any of the other funds that we hold at the Winnipeg Foundation, so it's our job to first select successful projects and then match them up to the different funds that we have available to support them. Yeah, so the question was, if you're applying for a collaborative grant in January, can you apply for a multi-year or resilient community grant in the spring? And the answer is yes, because organizations can submit one of their own and a collaborative project in the same year. Yeah, so the question was about the review process. It usually takes about 4 months. So as Neneth mentioned, our January intake, the grants committee will meet at the end of May to make their decisions. The timelines will be a little bit longer for the resilient community grants because of the two-stage application process. So if you think of stage 1 being due at the end of April, stage 2 being due at the end of June, and then decision in September. But for a one-time community grant, it's 4 months. Yeah, absolutely. And it's, I believe, as part of the correspondence, and I'm looking at Anna now, part of the correspondence that you get when we confirm that we've received your application is we indicate the date of the grants committee meeting. So this year it's scheduled for the end of May, so technically you could be looking at a June start date. Between when your grant is approved and when we get all the documentation out and we're able to flow payment, that usually takes 4 to 6 weeks after the approval. So depending on your cash flow, you'd want to plan accordingly. Yeah. Great. Okay, maybe one more question from the audience, and then again, we're happy to stick around and answer questions. Yes, yeah, you could consider reconciliation or capacity building as one of our priorities. Oh, the question was, can you choose priorities that are in 2 different causes? Our preference is for you to kind of work within one cause. As Neneth mentioned, it's better to address 1 or 2 grant-making priorities really well. You don't sort of get bonus points for if you address 10 priorities. So again, try to keep it within one cause. And again, as Neneth mentioned, it's not like we have certain budgets for each priority. It's really responding to what you tell us are your priorities as an organization. Okay, so with that, I'm just going to remind you of the grant staff that are in the room today for answering one-on-one questions. I can answer questions. Neneth, at the back of the room, we've got Noah on the camera, as well as Joanna Turner, who's our Grants Associate for Arts, Culture, and Heritage, has joined us. And Anna and Aaliyah can also answer questions. Again, reminder, Aaliyah manages our youth and philanthropy, so if you're thinking of hosting a summer intern this summer, she's the person to talk to. So thank you so much for coming out today. And yeah, have a good rest of your day.